Trigger chosen. Betrayed by a best friend. Longtime friend steals his idea, partner, or position. 1. Setup. I was a hopeful, hard-working man with strong bonds to those I trusted most. I grew up in a small town where every door felt open and every neighbor believed in a fair shot. I carried that dream into adulthood, working late, saving coins, building a business with a friend I called brother. We started in a tiny garage, coffee-stained whiteboards, loud jokes at noon, a plan to change how people use technology in everyday life. We talked about values, about keeping promises, about watching each other's backs. My partner wore the charm of loyalty like a badge, and I wore the faith of a man who'd finally found a team that matched his own heartbeat. The days blended into a rhythm of small victories and quiet pats on the back. The kind of life where you feel your legs get stronger whenever you see your name on a plaque or a smiling employee leaving a note of thanks. I buried myself in work because I believed in work as a map to a better future. I believed in the plan so deeply that I could taste it every morning when I opened the office door. The hum of the computers, the scent of new coffee, the steady march of progress. The bonds were real, and I thought they would outlive the rough edges we all carry. I shared my worries with him, whispered fears about cash flow and markets, asked for advice that I believed came from a place of care. He listened, or so I believed, and he offered a smile that felt like solid ground under my feet. Then the daily routine stubbornly repeated, and we rose not as rivals, but as co-pathers on the same road. And I felt the day would end with a handshake and a plan to push harder, to push farther, to push through the noise of doubt that every startup faces. Inciting incident, the betrayal came like a cold wind that cut through a room full of warmth. One morning, I walked into the office to find the door left ajar. The server log showing a pattern I did not recognize. A string of decisions that felt copied. A timeline that did not fit our agreed milestones. Quick words with our investors turned sour when he stood at the table with that calm smile I had trusted. The smile that used to reassure me. And he spoke as if the ideas had always been his. He took the questions, answered with confident ease, and I watched the proof slip through my fingers as if it had never belonged to me at all. Then came the public reveal in front of the board, with a slide deck that bore his name in bold and my name in a pale footnote. A legal formality presented as a triumph, a narrative that turned the pages of our story into a cautionary tale about timing and luck. He claimed my prototypes were nothing more than rough sketches, my patents as minor notes, my emails as casual bragging that never meant ownership. The room grew quiet as his voice filled the space where mine once stood, and I felt the air go thin, the pulse in my neck race, and a ringing sound begin somewhere behind my ears. The words he used were simple, the kind that could pass as normal if you did not understand the cost behind them. And in that moment, I saw my life rearrange itself into a bad memory, a chapter that would be closed without a chance to explain. I stood there with my hands in my pockets, feeling the weight of a future I had planned crumble into dust. And when he finally looked at me, the corners of his mouth barely twitched into a look that said, "You played yourself." And I chose the path that kept us moving forward. And I was left to face the silence that followed. A silence that was louder than any sentence he had spoken. Rising action. The fall was long and quiet, a slow unraveling of the self I had built. I walked through the city in a pale suit of nerves, tasting metal in my mouth whenever I swallowed, smelling the cold breath of winter that never left my bones. I collapsed in the hours between meetings, not with anger, but with a numb ache that asked me to forgive something I could not forgive without breaking. My hands shook in the mornings as I tried to sign new contracts that would never belong to me, and the words I wrote about strategy and growth felt hollow, like someone else had written them for a life that no longer fit me. I slept fitfully, dreaming of a courtroom where the verdict read "not guilty," while the verdict in my mind read "you betrayed me, and now the cost will be paid." I watched him move through networks I had once believed protected by loyalty. a circle of people who clapped when his name rose and whispered when mine did. It was not only money or status. It was the quiet, daily erasure of what we had built together. The sense that the trust we shared was a fragile thing and could be broken with a single snap of a finger. I learned to listen to the sound of the crowd, to study the way people looked when they spoke about him, to decode the little tells that told me where to strike next, not in rage but in strategy. I began to gather facts in the way a hunter gathers scents, keeping track of every lie, every deviation, every misrepresented fact, logging the dates, the witnesses, the emails with the timestamps of truth. I rebuilt my own plan in a hidden corner of the city, a place where the air smelled of rain and car exhaust, a place where I could hear the soft tick of a clock as I counted days and fortunes that would shift back toward me. The plan was not loud. It did not need to shout. It needed to be undeniable, airtight, and patient. I rebuilt my credibility with the same quiet discipline I had once used to debug a codebase in the middle of a long night. I found new allies in people who had watched us from the shadows. Those who believed in merit over vanity, whose own experiences had taught them that power can be a mask for cowardice. I studied the legal paths available and the human ones as well, because justice in my mind required both. I trained my voice to be calm, to persuade rather than to attack, to lay out the truth with the soft weight of a hammer that never misses its target. I learned to read a room like a map, to press the right questions at the right moment, to give a little and then take back more than I gave. The months stretched taut, and I felt a fire building in my chest, a slow, respectful anger that would not be spent on him until the moment came. Climax. That moment arrived at a charity gala turned press event, a night built on smiles and calculated appearances, a night that would reveal the truth to the world and let justice have its final say. He stood on the stage with the same practiced ease, his voice carrying a confident note as he praised the team and tapped the podium as if to emphasize the breath of victory. I walked up and stood beside him, a mirror held up to his misdeeds. The crowd gasped as I pulled a folder from my inside pocket, not loud or dramatic, just there, a steady weight that could not be ignored. I opened it and began to recount the chain of events the way a careful historian would, not with shouting, but with a precise, careful cadence. I showed the emails, the timestamps, the project timelines that proved he had known since the start that I owned the core idea, that I had asked him to guard it like a brother, and he had used that trust to write his own name in the margins of our future. I spoke of the prototypes that I had kept private, the notes that had never seen light, the code that had my fingerprint in every line. I did not paint him as a villain in a single stroke. I allowed the facts to tell the story and let the crowd fill in the rest with their own sense of right versus wrong. When he tried to interrupt, to smile his way through a storm, I simply mentioned the investors we had spoken to, the terms he had accepted, and the share of the company he had promised to me, in a way I had never seen him do in private. The room shifted as people realized that his careful charm hid a motive I had once believed to be noble. A murmur rose, not of pity, but of accountability. And that murmur grew into a chorus of disbelief, and then firm resolve. The media asked questions, and I answered with a calm that felt like a shield, turning every doubt into a point of leverage built on truth. By the end, the decision to reevaluate his role and our shared venture was no longer mine alone to carry. It was the room moving, the board leaning forward, the future being redirected by the weight of what had happened. He did not crumble with tears. He did not beg. He stood there with his gaze fixed somewhere beyond this moment, and that was enough to show the world what he was made of when no one was watching. A man who used trust as a weapon and forgot that trust is a currency that runs dry when spent on the wrong person. Redemption arc. The pain carved a new shape in me, a quieter, more purposeful version of myself. I did not walk away with a hero's medal, but I did walk away with something heavier and more durable: clarity. I turned that ache into a mission. I started a foundation to defend inventors and small partners who face betrayal, giving them a shield of practical advice, legal resources, and a network that could stand with them when the world calls a dream risky. I wrote long nights and shorter days, letting my fingers tell the truth on the page, crafting a book about trust and resilience that did not preach forgiveness as a soft surrender, but defined it as a wiser choice made after a clear assessment of risk and value. I learned to mentor others who stood where I once stood, guiding them to protect their ideas, to document their work, to keep their hearts intact while they fought for what was theirs. The new company I built did not chase the loud applause that my old partner enjoyed. It chased something steadier, a culture of merit, a discipline of accountability, a network of people who believed in the same stubborn truth. That work done with integrity is the best revenge. So I still carried the sting of his laughter at the back of my mind, but it was no longer a weapon aimed at him. It was a warning to others who might think the clever smile works forever. In my quiet rooms, I learned to listen more than I spoke and to value the kind of trust that cannot be bought. The foundation grew slowly, as all solid things do, and I found a new kind of pride in watching a young coder or designer walk into a room with a plan that belonged to them, and a future that could not be stolen by a single friend or a single moment of greed. My past betrayed me, but it did not define me. The book found readers who had walked dusty roads and forgotten promises. Readers who wrote back with letters about how they kept their credentials safe, how they refused to sign away their dreams to the first smiling liar who promised them a quick path to success. I learned to speak with the same honest, careful tone I now teach to others, not to inflame but to illuminate, to help others defend their work and to argue for fairness, without becoming the thing I despise, a liar wearing a kind face. In time, I discovered a family created not by a bloodline, but by shared struggle. A group of people who stood behind me as I stood behind them, trading sleepless nights for a stubborn belief that the truth would outlive a single moment of clever deception. Ending, I stand here now not as the man I pretended to be at the start, but as a man who chose the long road of justice.